A 2-point gap in the title race and 2 rounds to go. What a finale we could be set for here this season in the Formula PlayStation League. Trench's win last time out blew this championship wide open, and his bid to become a 3-time champion could well be realised over the course of the next 2 weeks. Round number 7 of 8 then sees us race tonight at the 4.3-kilometre Hungarian in Budapest as we begin to wrap this season up. It could be a massive twist at the title race, so a good job we've rocked up at one of the twistiest, most unforgiving tracks on the calendar, where focus is vital, as has been evidenced many times over the 35 races contested here in Formula 1 over the years. It can be won tonight by Carwyn Robb if he claims victory and Trench fails to finish. We will see a new champion crowned in Hungary, or can Trench take it to the final round in Austria? Let's find out. My name is Rob Kershaw. I'll be guiding you through qualifying and the Grand Prix this evening as we look to see if we will crown a first ever championship for Carwyn Robb, or whether TRT Trench can take this title race into the final round in Austria. 11 drivers with us for now. Connor will be joining mid-qualifying, which will make it 12. Of course, racing and numbers slightly more difficult to come by now that F1 2020 just starts to wind down a little, and drivers and leagues in particular start to switch their focus towards F1 2021, coming out just over a month from now, actually, a month from tomorrow, when the new game will be released, and everybody pretty excited for that one. Lots of new features, a completely new handling model. Online hopefully will become even better. It's certainly taken a big step up in the last couple of years, the online scene, with the arrival of F1 esports, and of course new game modes as well. I'm sure we're all looking forward to seeing or experiencing the new Breaking Point series in F1 2021. Currently got Worried Cloud then, and TRT Trench out there on outlaps at the moment. Worried Cloud has sparingly taken part in season 8.2 so far. Been racing in the Ferrari the whole time. 4 races and 3 points finishes. Out qualifying a teammate once so far. Still seeking that first podium of the season. Could potentially achieve that here this evening in Hungary. We will wait to find out whether or not he can. Trench then is the first one to begin a qualifying lap. He has gone out there on the medium compound of tyre. We'll see if anybody else will follow suit. Sankey Adet is being shown on the mediums as well at the moment in the Red Bull, as Trench opens up the DRS rear wing and heads down to turn number 2. Slots it into 3rd gear, short shifts to 4th on the exit. Rides the curb at turn 3, heads up the hill towards the very fast blind apex of turn 4, which brings him now into 5. This long sweeping right-hander, so easy to get on the power too early. And 6 and 7, the chicane once again, riding those curbs, being careful not to invalidate the lap time, as it's very easy to do through some of these twisty corners, in towards 8 and 9, and flicks the back end out slightly through turn 10. Another very tricky fast apex to get right through turn 11 as he heads down the hill in towards turn 12. 53 seconds it takes for the first 2 sectors to be completed, as round the penultimate corner he comes. Heads up the hill in towards what is essentially a high-speed hairpin at the final corner. Opens up the DRS. Pretty good lap this from Trench, and it is a 1:15.2 to open the account. Worried Cloud crosses the line and beats that with a 1:14.8, of course on the softer rubber. And the McLaren of Evan, meanwhile, goes P1 himself with a 1:13.8, I believe. We just saw Harrison, I want to say, going very twitchy on the exit of the final corner. So he's done a 1:15.8, and I think a little mistake at the final turn there. Eradicating that will result in a much better lap time for him. Certainly not representative of his pace. He's a very, very quick racing driver, is Harrison, somebody who we've constantly enjoyed watching race over last few seasons, really. Meanwhile, Crunchy Trees, his teammate, has gone into P5, 115.8. Sankey Aded on the medium tyres with a 117.8 meanwhile, so room for improvement for him there. Through turn 4 then it goes. Jendrik was involved in quite a, I don't really know how to put it, quite an aggressive battle, shall we say, with Bazooka Joe. Last time out resulted in Bazooka Joe's disqualification and subsequent race ban for Hungary as well. Jendrik then through the flat out turn 10 in towards the high speed 11. Tidy exit through down to the braking zone of turn 12 he comes. Is on the soft compound of tyre as Jendrik takes a bit more of a wide sweeping line and yeah, backs out of the lap time as well. So clearly didn't feel as though that was going to be any good, and he's going to round the final corner to go again. 1:14.5 from Buttons back in the Red Bull. So he separates Evan and Worry Cloud in there. So Evan's 1:13.8. Looking fairly unstoppable so far. TRT Tom has made his arrival into the league, and he is on the medium tyres, but of course he's just done a 1:30.8 there. So backed off of his lap time, or made a big mistake, whichever one it was. He will certainly be going quicker as this session progresses. Currently one of 4 drivers to go out there on the medium tyres and set laps. Carwyn Robb will be the 5th as he comes in towards turn 1. Our championship leader at the moment by just the 2 points coming into the penultimate round. His teammate Trench up there in P5, so the 2 Alfa Romeos mirroring each other in terms of tyre strategy for qualifying, which of course leads them into the Grand Prix. The top 10 all start on the tyres they qualify on. Anybody starting outside the top 10 gets a free choice of compound for the Grand Prix, although there are only 11 drivers with us at the moment. It will be 12 when Connor arrives, so that doesn't really make a big difference at the moment in a race like this, in a lobby like this, as Carwyn Robb lost the back end a couple of times there through turn 7 and then turn 8 as he rides the entrance curb going in towards 11. Heads down to 12, 53.0 in the first in the middle sector, I should say. So a pretty good lap so far, especially considering he is on the harder compound of tyre available for qualifying. Up towards the final corner, once again skates around with the back end, trying to send him round and up across the line. 1:14.6 and moves comfortably in front then of his teammate Trench by 0.6 of a second. That then is all 11 drivers setting lap times so far in the session. Colin has just moved up into the top 10, putting himself ahead of Jendrik. Jendrik now in the Renault, the last of the current lap setters. Worry Cloud has gone back out in the Ferrari on an out lap as he just brings the car in towards the final couple of corners before he begins his next lap. So 35 races here in Hungary, 16 of those have come from pole position, which is a little bit surprising when you consider the lack of overtaking opportunities here at Hungary, because even turn 1 has become a lot quicker over recent years. It's become less of a heavy braking zone and subsequently much less of an overtaking opportunity. Turn 2 is quicker than turn 1. It's possible. Daniel Ricciardo certainly has proved it's possible into turn 2 and turn 1 for that matter. Apart from the first 2 corners, it's just so difficult to get a move done around here. So the 19 races that haven't been won from pole position, either strategy or engine failures, or of course just some very good passes for the lead. Worry Cloud, that's a very common mistake on the inside of turn 5, and in the end spinning that car around. So that's that lap gone. Probably that set of tyres gone as well, I would suspect. Tom, meanwhile, has gone quicker in the Williams whilst all that was going on. 1:14.7 for him to move himself up into the top 4. So good lap for the Williams driver, the second quickest medium runner at the moment. Carwyn Robb just in front of him by about 1/10 of a second. Colin, meanwhile, still out there in the Haas on the medium tyres as he slightly fishtails it on the exit of turn 4. Looks as though he's backed out actually of this lap, has Colin. We'll see as well if Worry Cloud will come back around to Start another lap. I imagine with that spin, his tyres will be pretty shot at this point, so we'll need to come back in for another set. 9 minutes to go, so plenty of time to come back round and set another lap. Here then is the pace setter Evan in the McLaren. He's been a reserve so far this season for 2 races, 1 podium in that time, and certainly with the pace that you've got at the moment on the tower on the left-hand side, you would suspect, as he invalidates his lap time, that he could well be on course for his first victory of the season as well. Still leading this session by 7/10 of a second from second place to Buttons back. So we'll see if the Red Bull driver can get himself any closer. Potentially close enough to go ahead and claim pole position. Connor has now joined the session, so we have 12 drivers for this Grand Prix as Buttons back brings his Red Bull in towards chicane of 6 and 7 as he prepares for another flying lap. Difficult really to find many places to weave. It's certainly not difficult to warm the tyres up at this circuit. It's very twisty, very bendy. There's lots of high speed corners that the tyres will heat up on, particularly as well in Hungary. It's normally in the peak of summer, so it tends to be a very, very warm Grand Prix and very tough on the tyres as well. Tom has retired from the session meanwhile in the Williams. Doesn't look as though he's stopped on track, so I think he's retired in the pits. As down towards turn number 1 then comes Buttons back, so Tom will be getting 4th at best in qualifying, with Warwick Cloud capable of going quicker behind him. Trench and Harrison as well, both able to improve on the 115s that they have at the moment. Trench, you would imagine, will drop into the 114s at some stage. Harrison with a 115.8 at the moment. Crunchy Trees behind him with a very similar lap time indeed. And then Sankey, Ed and Colin rounding out the top 10. Runs back then through 6 and 7 once again. Yeah, Mercedes. That's what I meant. I meant that. So I've just been so used to Tom winning in a white car that I got confused. Anyway, Buttons back in towards turn 13 as he heads up the hill through to the final corner of 14 in 5th gear, down to 4th and 3rd, and short shifts to 4th midway through the corner. Flicks open the DRS rear wing and across the line, and he improves by nearly 2/10 of a second, but that is not enough to displace Evan, who is currently top of the timesheets at the moment. So P2 for the Red Bull man. Jendrik has gone back out and he's gone quicker. P7 for him in the Renault, 115.6 at the moment, as we wait for Warwick Cloud to come out of the pits and begin a flying lap. And Crunchy Trees has just had his lap invalidated meanwhile, so in the AlphaTauri he may go round again. He may just come back into the pits. He has got time to go back in and get a change of tyres, and indeed he does. 5.5 minutes left in qualifying here in Hungary. The Hungaroring is actually the first venue for Formula One held behind what used to be the Iron Curtain, having hosted top-level racing continuously since 1986. Iron Curtain, of course, doesn't exist anymore, but certainly did whilst the Hungaroring initially became a Formula One circuit and hosted some F1 Grand Prix. In its first few years, Hungary actually has more of a tradition as well in motorsport than a lot of people would think. Neplage Park, also in Budapest, held races all the way back in the 1930s. In 36, the Budapest Grand Prix was held at that circuit. Tazio Nuvolari won in an Alfa Romeo. And of course, we have 2 Alfa Romeos out in front in the championship as well at the moment. Harrison then, through turn 1, opens up the DRS as he heads down towards the second corner. He's gone out actually on medium tyres as Evan retires from the session in the McLaren, and he's actually stopped in the 3rd sector, so I believe he's lost it through turn 11. which is easy to do, actually. And Harrison, that's easy to do as well. Goes wide through turn 4 and invalidates his lap time. Connor then is out there in the Ferrari. Up towards 4 he goes, bounces over the curb and in towards turn 5 and does exactly what his teammate Warrior Cloud did a few moments ago. Takes too much curb on the inside. This time, though, he manages, unlike his teammate, to just catch the slide and prevent himself from losing any more time. Speaking of Warrior Cloud, he's coming up towards the final corner now. And around the final turn for him, opens up the DRS and across the line. P3, 1 minute 14.6, a few tenths of a second away from Button's back. Certainly doesn't look as though anyone's going to be able to displace Evan from top spot between now and the end of the session in about 3¼ minutes time. Yeah, at the Hungarian. Colin then has gone back out. He's been pushed back into 11th place by Jendrik's improved lap time earlier on. Speaking of Jendrik, he's also retired from the session. So lots of drivers clearly feeling as though they can't do any more at the moment. Jendrik settling for the 1:15.6. Harrison, though, will go quicker than a 1:15.8, so I'm not too sure about that for Jendrik. Just under 0.2 of a second separating those two, so there certainly is a possibility for Harrison to break into the top 7, potentially the top 6, which would be rather damaging for Trench if he is to be displaced. But Carmen Robb's retired from the session. Trench has 0.6 of a second to make up if he is to catch his teammate and qualify in front of him, as Colin now rounds the final corner and he crosses the line to begin his latest lap. He's now on the soft tyres, so we'll see potentially a marked improvement here, provided he doesn't invalidate his lap time or make any other of 100 different mistakes that it's possible to make here in Budapest. And Connor has now retired from the session, so he'll be starting plumb last in P12, but he does get a free choice of tyres for the race. Meanwhile, Crunchy Trees back up to P5, 1 minute 14.6 from the Alpha Tauri. So that is a good lap time from him, and he's very, very close to Carwin Robb, so we'll see. Probably won't have enough time to go around and set another lap time. Evan says his car lost all grip and tapped the wall, so that's the reason that he is out of this qualifying session. Right, Trench is out there as well, and he's just set a purple first sector as he goes through turn 5. Of course, his original lap time was set on the medium tyres, so expect him to go massively quicker now on the softs, and out qualifying his teammate Carwin Robb will be very useful for him indeed. Going into this penultimate race of the season, Trench is... Oh no, he's in the wall. I was going to say he's yet to out-qualify a teammate this season, and he will not do so here because he's speared off into the barrier on the exit of turn 11, and that is him out of qualifying. And that really, for the most part, will be that. Harrison's still out there in the Alpha Tauri. He's coming through now to turn 2. Still on medium tyres, though, for him as he heads up the hill towards turn 4. Colin out there as well, but he's invalidated his lap time. Sankey are dead in the pits, as are Buttons back and Crunchy Trees. So it's basically just all on Harrison now to see what he can do between now and the end of the session. He's done an Evan. Yeah, TRT Trench. Unfortunately for him, it was looking good that lap time as well. That's the biggest shame about it. He was just coming up towards the second sector split, so it would have been extremely interesting to see what he could have done at the end of that lap, but in the end lost it on the exit of turn 11, and that was all she wrote for that qualifying for TRT Trench. Harrison round the final corner for him. Doesn't look, to be fair, no, it will be an improvement on his previous lap time. And as Harrison crosses the line and finishes off qualifying for Hungary, he goes P7, so a good lap there from him. And he actually moves in front of Trench as well, so the news gets worse for TRT Trench as he ends up qualifying down in 8th place, 4 positions behind his teammate Carwin Robb. They will both be on medium tyres for the start of the Grand Prix. Evan then takes pole position by over half a second from Buttons back. One of the less exciting and dramatic ends to a qualifying session. Warwick Cloud in P3, Carwin Robb in 4th place. Crunchy Trees in 5th, Tom in 6th in the end for Mercedes, not Williams. Harrison in P7, Trench in 8th. Yendrick takes 9th. Colin rounds out the top 10 with Sankey a dead behind him in 11th, and Connor joined the session late and didn't set a lap time. So predictions then for the Grand Prix. Who's going to win? Who's going to, of course, take the championship incentive going into the last round with just the 2 points separating Carwin Robb and Trench going into Austria. Carwin Robb, remember, can win the championship, but he needs a Grand Prix victory, and he needs Trench to not score any points this evening, whether that be by finishing outside the top 10 or not finishing the race at all. If Trench gets the same result, he will end up being 22 points 23 points in front of Carwin Robb, but of course that is not quite enough. And remember as well, of course, that you do get a point for fastest lap and also for pole position. So Evan has got the point for pole position in this Grand Prix. It is still possible for Carwin Robb to go on and win this Grand Prix with a fastest lap as well. Doesn't really matter, and if Trench wins and gets the fastest lap, doesn't really make a huge difference. He'll then be 24 points clear and still not a championship winning margin. So whatever happens, it looks very, very likely indeed that this championship battle is set to go to the very last race of the season. Evan isn't really thinking about that. He would much prefer to just focus on getting this victory. And if qualifying is anything to go by, it looks as though he'll be a difficult man to beat. Meanwhile, Warwick Cloud and Carwin Robb have both been disqualified from the formation lap for making contact, so that's their formation lap's over. And it is actually quite significant because tyre temperatures do matter now on the formation laps. When they were first introduced on F1 2016, it would go to a cutscene and then everybody would end up on exactly the same temperature tyres anyway. So that was just more for effect and more for show because the fans wanted it. But now they've actually introduced tyre temperatures to that as well. So they'll be sat on the grid now whilst all the rest of the drivers are coming through. And they'll be losing valuable tyre temperature. 2-stop around this circuit. No real way around that. A 1-stop is pretty much impossible without getting a puncture. Soft, medium, medium seems to be the way to go for most of, for all of the soft runners. However, of course, we have got most of the drivers starting on the medium tyres. 7 of those, to be precise, for the start of this Grand Prix. So you do wonder, will that potentially be a case of 1 or 2 drivers going for a 1-stop starting on the medium tyres as Harrison leaves the session, so let's hope he can rejoin in the next few moments. But likelihood is it will be a medium hard for those guys, or potentially medium soft. Who knows? Who really knows what's going to happen? No one knows what's going to happen. It's league racing. No one's got a clue. Right, we are just about ready to go then here in Hungary. Evan on pole position for the first time this season. Can he pull off the Grand Prix victory? The Hungarian Grand Prix is underway. It looks like a pretty good start from Buttons back in 2nd place in the Red Bull. And he's already side by side with Evan. And he's down the inside of him going into turn 1. What a start as well. That is from the Alpha Tauri of Harrison, but that looks like his ghost car. He has now joined the session, and meanwhile down the inside goes Evan, and there's contact with Buttons back, and they're side by side through turn 2, but Buttons back has the lead of the Hungarian Grand Prix. A brilliant start for the Red Bull driver. The start is so critical in Hungary, and Buttons back has nailed that. And Trench, what a start from him, from 8th to 3rd off the start of this Grand Prix. He's moved ahead of his teammate Carwin Robb, who's now down to 6th. So a significant change out front between the two Alfa Romeo drivers. And all of a sudden, this championship looks extremely different to how it did even after qualifying ended. So Trench then up into third place and already in front of his teammate Carwin Robb. Meanwhile, Buttons back then, 0.6 of a second in front of Evan as they round the final corner to begin lap number 2. Harrison has fallen down to P10. Oh, as wide goes Connor. So Connor in the Ferrari going very wide. And has he lost part of his front wing? Doesn't look like he has. So yeah, he survived any wing damage there. Harrison back in the session, down to P9 though from the start, and he's chasing Colin, and he's trying to go round the outside of him, ducks back underneath him on the exit of turn 2, but won't be able to make that stick through 3, and Evan going side by side with Buttons back, trying an ambitious move through turn 4, didn't quite come off, and Buttons back keeps the lead of the Grand Prix for now, but you can see Evan is really pressuring the Red Bull to retake the lead of the Grand Prix that he had from pole position. Harrison gets past Colin, meanwhile on the way up towards turn 6, that's him back up to 8th place as Connor gets a penalty in the Ferrari early doors on lap number 2, not lap number 3. Hopefully that's another thing that gets fixed for F1 2021 is the lap counter and the timing screens on the left hand side. It's a real pain. It's a hard life. Round the final corner then, and less than 1/10 of a second separating a lot of these drivers. Buttons back, 118.4, the fastest lap of this Grand Prix so far. Trench then in third place at the moment, currently 15 points on the board for him to Carwin Robb's 8. So that's going to mean Trench will take the lead of the championship going into the next round. It's a stark likelihood that whoever finishes in front of the other between the two title contenders will be in the lead of the championship. Going into the final round, of course, Carwin Robb already in front, so if he does finish in front of Trench, of course he will be, but if TRT Trench finishes ahead of Carwin Robb, only 2 points behind him right now, it looks very likely indeed that he will end up being in the lead of the championship going into Austria in a week's time. His teammate Carwin Robb, meanwhile, half a second away from the leading AlphaTauri of Crunchy Trees as Connor comes into the pits for Ferrari. It's been a pretty horrid start for the two Ferrari cars, with Rory Cloud down in P12. They've both come into the pits along with Sankey Yadet for an enforced pit stop. Connor on the hard, Sankey Yadet and Rory Cloud both on the medium tyres, having made their initial pit stops. Carwin Robb, he's on the mediums, but he's not leaving Crunchy Trees alone. He's all over the back of him as they go through the final corner, and he's past him as they swoop underneath at the final corner. That's a brilliant overtake there from Carwin Robb. Where's he finding the grip as they go in towards turn 1 with the Alfa Romeo in front? Tom, meanwhile, in P4, just behind TRT Trench. And Evan is still putting the pressure on Buttons back. He's still right behind the Red Bull. He's getting a great tow up towards turn 4, but it's just so difficult to do anything with it as Connor gets another penalty for Ferrari. So already racking those penalties up on lap number 4, unfortunately for him. Connor this season, 1 points finish and 2 non-finishes from the 5 races he's contested so far. And currently in 12th minute, of course, with a few drivers in the lobby, it's always possible that despite a bad race, you can always get yourself some points on the board, provided things in front go his way. He has been passed though by Rory Cloud just recently because he is on the hard tyres compared to Rory Cloud's mediums. That's of course part of the reason for it. As round the final corner we go again, and Evan here, you would think, has his best chance of getting the lead yet, as Buttons back looks to break the toe. Evan closing in down towards turn 1, switches to the inside. Has he got the line? Can Buttons back break late enough? Can he defend the outside? They're going to be side by side going in towards turn 2. Buttons back will have the inside line. Can Evan hold it round the outside here? There's very nearly contact again between these two. Evan all the way round the outside, has the inside for turn 3 and takes the lead of the Hungarian Grand Prix. A brilliant overtake from Evan. Buttons back bravely tried to defend it but couldn't quite hold off the McLaren And now he has to look at his wing mirrors as well as looking in front at the McLaren, because TRT Trench, seeking further ground in this championship, will be looking eagerly to take advantage of what will possibly now be a reeling Buttons back. Through turn 11 they go, down towards the third to last corner of turn 12. TRT Tom as well joining in this battle right behind these three. And Carwin Rob's there too in the second Alfa Romeo. Into the pits comes Buttons back, so he's had quite enough of that battle. He doesn't want to be on this train anymore. And he is into the pits, so quite an early pit stop for the Red Bull driver. What this has meant is Tom has a bit of a better slipstream to Trench, but not really good enough to go for the move just yet. Buttons back then in the pits along with Crunchy Trees, and good job with ghosting. Would have been an unsafe release, almost a Renault Force India type collision between those two. If anybody can remember back to 2010. A while ago now, isn't it? Dear oh dear. Right, out of the pits then comes Crunchy Trees in P9, so both him and Buttons back have rejoined in some nice clear air. And Buttons back 8.5 seconds behind Colin in P7 in the Haas at the moment. The big question is, will that prompt any action from Evan or Trench? We'll see. Buttons back sporadically has been at the front in the last few seasons of racing in the Formula PlayStation League, and it'd be good to see him back on an FPSL podium, has to be said, and we'll see if he can achieve that here. He has got some very, very strong competition though from these drivers out front. Trench has done a great job here of closing the gap up to Evan, and he has DRS, and Evan already goes to the inside and weaves and tries to break the slipstream. Trench gets closer. Is he close enough for the move? Doesn't really look it, and no, he isn't. Would have been a very daring at this point. What he doesn't need is to lose his front wing, or even worse, retire from the Grand Prix, because that would give so much incentive to Carwin Rob as Connor gets another time penalty for exceeding track limit. Sankey Aden also with the black and white flag to his name, indicating that he has picked up penalties thus far in this Grand Prix. Through turn 5, up towards the chicane of 6 and 7. Evans still holding the lead in this Grand Prix. No pit stop just yet from these guys. Evan, of course, is on the soft tyres, so you would fully expect him to pit before the medium runners behind him, although these guys behind will, of course, have dirty air, and they'll have a little bit of understeer because they're all stuck behind another car, so that's going to affect their tyre life a little bit more, but we shouldn't nevertheless expect the mediums to wear as quickly as the softs, as Connor gets out of the way to be lapped on lap number 7 by this group of cars. Trench then a little bit closer this time than he was on the last lap, as he gets a little bit closer to the back of Evan. Tom and Carwin Rob just behind them. Trench goes for a half move down the inside. Will it turn into a full move going into turn 2? Not really. Carwin Rob just behind Tom still, and into turn 2 they go. Trench unable to take the lead, and it was good driving from Evan there. Had to see Trench coming, otherwise there would have been contact, and Tom was getting very close to the back of Trench up towards turn 4. Decides against the optimistic move going into that very quick blind apex left-hander, and it's as you were between this current top 4. Buttons back has now closed the gap to just over 2 seconds to Colin, but he has also picked up a penalty in the midst of this, as Connor gets another one as well in the Ferrari. So it's not been an ideal start for either of the two Ferrari cars, has to be said. Trench through turn 12 then, following Evan through once again. As up towards turn 13 they go, and Evan pits. So a virtual safety car as well, so that's perfect timing, isn't it? It's very good timing for Evan, so he can use this VSC to pretty much get a free pit stop. And Carwin Rob just about came up to the pit entrance as that virtual safety car was being deployed. So I wouldn't say he locked in, but he definitely reacted to that, and he was passing the pit entrance just in time to come into the pits as the VSC was being brought out. So out he goes then on the hard tyres. So we'll wait to see if there's any chance of those hards going to the end of the race. I would suspect not, I have to say. And the VSC still ongoing. So this is so costly, and this is big for the championship now, because Cohen Robb will surely be in front of Trench when Trench eventually makes his first pit stop, because this VSC has lasted the length of time that it's taken for Evan and Cohen Robb to make a pit stop. So they have gained so much time through that stop, and yeah, it was very good timing for Cohen Robb. He was very smart in that one. Noticed the VSC had been deployed and instantly took that opportunity to come into the pits. And the big question now is, do Trench and Tom decide to pit, or will they go longer and change their strategy, go to a plan B at this stage? We'll see. It is going to be a plan B as Trench stays out and Tom continues with him. So they know they're going to lose a lot of ground if they pit, so it might even be worth waiting for another VSC or a full safety car between now and the end of the Grand Prix. Connor, meanwhile, has retired from the session, so he's out. Just 11 drivers with us now between now and the end of the Grand Prix. 26 laps left to go here in Hungary as Harrison and Jendrik go side by side through turn 1. Who's going to come out on top in towards 2? There's very nearly contact as Harrison goes down the inside. Jendrik tries to hold the outside. Harrison has the inside line and he has the drive. Jendrik, though, is still there, and there is contact, and Harrison flips upside down. He's out of the Grand Prix, smashing into the barrier. It looked as though there might have been contact between Jendrik and Harrison, and it was almost a game of robot wars as Harrison was sent spearing into the barrier and his car flipped in all sorts of different ways, and that is him out of the Hungarian Grand Prix. Interestingly, only yellow flags without a safety car at the moment through Sector 1. And yeah, it will remain that way, so green flags as we get back underway. That is a huge incident for Harrison after that collision, seemingly with Jendrik. And that is his race done. Well, if there was contact there, Jendrik will be in a bit of trouble for that one, as Warwick Hub and Sankey Adet then make their way up into the top 10. So that now means that anyone who finishes this Grand Prix, anyone who sees the checkered flag, will be picking up points at the end of this Grand Prix. Trench and Tom stay out once again. Bit of a lock-up on the left front for Tom as he follows Trench through turn number 2. Doesn't really look as though he's troubling Trench all that much at the moment. Looks as though Trench is able to keep the Mercedes pretty well at bay, although Tom's just gone 3/10 quicker through the first sector to set a purple first sector. Although that will not be conducive to setting a purple middle sector. That will only be conducive to some very sweaty clothing as he exits turn 5 and very nearly spins the car. It was a very good catch, actually. Very well saved from Tom there. You see a lot of drivers completely losing it and spinning around as Cohen Robb gets past Evans. That's pretty big. So Cohen Robb then pretty much now has the lead of the Grand Prix. So he inherits what is a net P1 at the moment. So he gets past the McLaren then. And that's a big move in the context of this Hungarian Grand Prix, and an even bigger move in the context of the World Championship. So he's in front. He has what is the race lead at the moment. 15 seconds behind Trench and Tom, so he will be in front of those two when they pit, but those two of course are going for a different strategy at the moment, looking to do something different after the McLaren of Evan and the Alfa Romeo of Cohen Robb both got a free pit stop with the virtual safety car. Cohen Robb winning would be a win from outside the front row. There's been 13 of those in the past in Hungary. Button took his first ever Formula 1 victory in Hungary in 2006 from 14th on the grid, the scene of those wide eyes in Parc Ferme, not quite believing that he'd won the Grand Prix. Ricciardo as well in 2014, up until Monaco 2018, he hadn't won a Grand Prix starting inside the top 4. Dan Ricciardo, so pretty impressive. I think it actually might have been top 6, you know, with that particular stat. And Sebastian Vettel in 2015 as well, another example of a a crazy race in Hungary. He won for Ferrari in a race where Mercedes had a little bit of a shocker with Lewis Hamilton and Nico Rosberg. Meanwhile, Tom down towards turn 1. He's getting closer, but just doesn't seem to be able to get close enough to trench in towards the first corner. As they exit turn 1, now down towards 2. Trench with a good exit, and Tom once again has to just settle for staying behind the Alfa Romeo for the time being. Evan is still there with Carwin Robb, hasn't quite dropped a second back yet. Buttons back is another 2.5 seconds back from the McLaren. As in towards turn 2 they go. Jendrik still out there as well in the Renault, so he has not pitted just yet. He stays out and essentially looks to mirror the strategy of the two drivers in front of him in the shape of Trench and Tom. Carwin Robb will soon start to get very close to the back of the Renault driver. Through the tight, twisty corners. There you go then. Jendrik has just admitted fault, by the way, for that one between himself and Harrison, so it did look as though he just kept his nose in through turn 3 and yeah, made contact with the back of that car. Jendrik, whilst I've been watching that, by the way, has just conceded 2 positions, so whilst I was looking at the Discord chat to see whose fault it was, I completely missed Carwin Robb and Evan both getting past Jendrik. So there you go. Jendrik's losing a lot of grip now on those soft tyres. Down towards turn 1, that promotes Carwin Robb up to 3rd place, and Evan half a second back from him in P4. Things you miss when you're not looking. Buttons back is now half a second back. Oh, not anymore. Jendrik's gone wide and Buttons back passes him. So there you go. That is P5 now for the Red Bull. Jendrik really struggling for grip on those medium tyres. He's locking up quite a bit. So I think really what his tyres are screaming for is to come off and be replaced with a new set. A lock up for Tom there through turn 12. 7/10 back from Trench. They are still 15 seconds clear of Carwin Robb, so it's not as if the pace is that bad considering that Carwin Robb is on much fresher tyres. So they are able to stay out, and every lap they remain out on track is of course another lap where you just start to think that they can make a one-stop work. You just start to wonder if a set of hard tyres will take them to the end of the Grand Prix when they eventually do decide to come in for a fresh set of rubber. Another lock-up for Tom going in towards turn 2. And through the flat-out 3 they go, up towards turn number 4. Flat-out left-hander, which brings them through towards 5. Red Bull, one of 8 different constructors to have won here before in Hungary. Join Renault, Benetton, McLaren, Ferrari, Williams, and of course Honda. One of the few Grand Prix victories for Honda. In fact, I'm pretty sure, correct me if I'm wrong anyone, but that might be their only Grand Prix victory for Honda in 2006 with Jenson Button. I might be wrong. I would need to do my job and do more research for that. Anyway, round the final corner goes Tom. Still just over half a second back from Trent, so it doesn't look as though he's going to be troubling the Alfa Romeo in towards turn 1. And once again, it's a similar story. He is able to brake a lot later, gets a lot closer, locks up though, as he comes into the apex of the first corner. But it's as you are between those two. Right, Jendrik has now finally come into the pits. He's looked in need of a pit stop for the last couple of laps, and in he comes. So he will ship positions, you would imagine, to both Crunchy Trees and potentially Colin. Maybe not though, he might just be okay actually to be in front of Colin as the Haas driver rounds the final corner. It will be tight. Colin will be in front though as he gets himself past the Renault. No, he might not be in front. So he didn't make up as much time as I thought down the home straight. And Jendrik does get in front. So, yeah, good stuff from the Renault pit crew. And Colin then has to settle for being behind Jendrik. Jendrik on fresh hards as well. So Jendrik will essentially almost act as a bit of a yardstick now for Tom and Trench as they look to see when they should come into the pits. Although Tom decides that time is now, so he gets the car stopped for the pit lane limiter. Evan with a 3-second penalty now, so that's going to cost him. Carwin Rob has a penalty as well, though, so that could also cost him the victory here. Tom onto a set of hard tyres, and the question is, when will Trench react to that? Does he stay out for a few more laps and be on fresher rubber towards the end of the Grand Prix, or does he stay out for a few laps more? Worth remembering that in the last couple of laps he's only lost a couple of tenths to Carwin Rob. So, oh, he gets a penalty as well, though, so that's a lot of drivers now on penalties. Tom, Crunchy Trees, Colin and Worry Cloud, the only 4 drivers not on penalties, so that could really play into the hands of Tom, the only one of the leading 5 to not have a penalty to his name, and you can see how close it is between those guys. And once Trench comes into the pits, he will essentially be in the middle of that battle as he rounds turn 11 down towards turn number 12. Just under 0.4 of a second down on his previous best, sector 2. On 16 lap old medium tyres, so Trench's pace has been unbelievably consistent as he rounds the final corner and comes into the pit. So that he's reacting to Tom's pit stop. Tom has the undercut over TRT Trench. We'll see if Trench can mitigate that as he brings his Alfa Romeo in towards the pit box. There's the white overalled mechanics waiting for him. On go a fresh set of hard tyres, and there's a virtual safety car. So it's essentially played almost back in Trench's favour. Carwin Rob has now taken the lead, but Trench will not be as far behind them as he ordinarily would have been, and that's allowed him to rejoin now in front of Buttons Back and Tom. So those two will be raging at that, particularly for Tom, because he pitted just a lap before that VSC was deployed, and he's now lost that position to Trench. I think without that virtual safety car, I want to say that Tom would have been in front. We'll never know now, of course, but I think he would have cleared him. So he'll be frustrated by that. He remains in P5, but he also remains the only driver in the top 5 without a penalty to his name at present. So Trench a couple of seconds behind Evan. He's on much fresher tyres than both of these guys. So Carwin Rob and Evan pretty much are guaranteed to have to make another pit stop. Trench and Tom will be trying to go to the end of the Grand Prix. Buttons Back absolutely has to stop again, and Jendrik is out of the Grand Prix, so I suspect then that he was the reason for that VSC, and he's crashed into the barrier on the pit entrance. So there you go, there's a rare one, and that's the Renault out of the Grand Prix. So just 9 runners left in this race now. Tom following Buttons Back as they pass the stricken Renault, who's currently stuck on that pit wall. Doesn't look as though Buttons Back's going to have any defence here to TRT Tom as he sails past the Red Bull and goes into 4th place. Just over a 10.5 now behind Trench, who is reeling in the top 2 of Carwin Rob and Evan. So it's going to be a tense ending, this, because Trench on fresh hards. Carwin Rob and Evan, when they eventually come into the pits, if they come into the pits, they might yet try and go to the end. If they do go to the end, Trench will be following them and chasing them down on much fresher rubber. If they do come back into the pits, Trench and Tom, you suspect, might potentially be reaching puncture territory by the end of the Grand Prix, and Carwin Rob and Evan will be chasing them down on fresher rubber. So this is all made now for an extremely intriguing strategical battle. Do Carwin Rob and Evan stay out? Do they come into the pits and go on to fresh rubber, assuming that they'll have enough time left in the Grand Prix to chase Trench and Tom back down? That is the main question. They are staying out again, so you would imagine here that they're both of the opinion at the moment that these tyres will go to the end. Trench, though, fastest lap, 1:17.2. So it's going to be tight, isn't it, really? to see who's gonna win this race. Essentially, you know, whether the front two will come into the pits. It's as simple as that in the end. It's just a question of who will come out on top by the end of this Grand Prix. 1:17.1 from Max Verstappen, the lap record in a Grand Prix. Round turn 5 they go. Evan there just having to check the rear end. Potentially another little suggestion that he's starting to struggle for grip just a little on those hard tyres. Although in fairness, it is quite a bit of a traction zone, the exit of turn 5, so not necessarily anything to do with that. In towards the penultimate corner they go once again. Trench now less than a second behind Evans, so he will have DRS as they round the final corner and head down the home straight. Doesn't look as though he's quite going to be close enough though to the back of the McLaren to have a go in towards turn 1, as into the pits as well comes Buttons back. So having been passed by Tom, a couple of laps to go, he now pits, and on go a fresh set of medium tyres for the Red Bull driver as he makes his way towards the end of the pit lane, and we see him rejoin pretty comfortably, very comfortably in fact, in 5th place in front of Crunchy Trees. Through turn 1 he goes and exits down towards 2. Trench then, 5/10 now back from Evan, so the gap is closing. Evan now has fallen 2.5 back from Carwin Robb, and just as I mentioned his name, he has picked up another penalty, as has Buttons back straight out the pits, so more penalties coming in for those two. Tom still doesn't have one, still keeping it nice and clean. Clean AF boy, as he would say. I'm not actually going to say those two words. Anyway, Trench, final corner. Surely now he's going to have a good opportunity, because Evans going to be running out of ever so slightly in that McLaren. Down towards turn 1 they go. He's getting closer. Isn't close enough though for the move. No, thought about it. Put himself in Evans' wing mirror, but just isn't quite close enough at the moment. In towards turn 1. He's very close though, going towards turn 2. Does he go for the move? He does. It's a bit of a half one, and he spun. And that for Trench is a huge, huge error of judgment. It wasn't a move he needed to go for, and that's cost him massively now to his teammate Carwin Robb. He could have been patient, he could have waited a bit longer, but he wanted the move done, and that's now put him down to 4th place, and Tom is up into the podium places. In the end, he's recovered just enough that he hasn't lost an unbelievable amount of lap time, but that's going to be huge now. That's going to be costly for him between now and the end of the race, because it definitely looks as though Carwin Robb and Evan are going to the end on their respective set of hard tyres. It just didn't look as though he needed to go for it. Trench, bottom line, just looked as though that move wasn't ever really on going in towards turn 2, and it was proved that it wasn't, and went down the inside. It was ambitious. He came steaming in, made contact with Evan, and that was all she wrote, and into a spin he went. Thankfully for him though, didn't concede any damage as a result of that, so the front wing is still intact. He can keep going, but those hard tyres now would have taken a little bit of damage from that. What does mean is that everybody's sort of a bit kind of spaced out now. Buttons back, 1:17.0, the fastest lap of the Grand Prix. Nobody's within DRS range of anybody at the moment, so Tom 2 seconds now behind Evan. You would anticipate that he's going to be closing in pretty quickly on such fresher tyres, you would imagine. Lewis Hamilton in 2019 became the first driver since the dawn of the hybrid era to win back-to-back Hungarian Grand Prix. And he was also the previous driver to win 2 in a row at this circuit in 2012 and 2013, with McLaren in 2012, and then of course 2013, his first year with Mercedes, winning that Grand Prix. And after that, well, as you know, the rest is history. A further 5 World Championships added to the tally since his arrival at Mercedes. 7-time World Champion now, looking to make it 8 this season, but tell you what, he's got some good competition, hasn't he, now, from Max Verstappen. Tom finds himself just under 2 seconds behind the McLaren of Evan. So we'll see now how quickly he can close that gap. Evan still 2.5 back from Carwin Robb, although Carwin Robb's penalties, I would think, would now put him behind Evan. Trench 4 seconds back from Tom as well. So yeah, just losing a bit more lap time now is Trench. Those tyres will be pretty shot at this rate as he continues to ship more time to him. So yeah, it was a costly error really, wasn't it, for Trench, has to be said. I think if he could turn back time and reverse it, he probably would, because I think he would have got the move done on the next lap. That's going to be the most frustrating aspect of that for him. So yeah, frustrating one for him. Tom 1.5 back from Evan now, so continues to close that gap. Budapest, home to racing in the 1930s. After the Second World War, of course, racing was, as you would expect, a little bit slow to get back underway. Ferihegi Airport, which I probably just butchered the pronunciation of, also in Budapest, held a few Formula Junior races, although those junior races were switched back to Neplage. Continued at that circuit going into the 1970s, but it was just a way really after the Second War ended in 1945, just to try and get racing back off the ground again in this part of the world, and they did so successfully because, of course, the Hungaroring and this race in Budapest continues to be on the Formula 1 calendar. So yeah, it's a track, it's a country with quite a bit of character in terms of motorsport. Is Hungary, as Tom now breaks into within a second of Evan. So he has DRS, he will get closer. Of course, he won't be close enough for the overtake, and he'll probably have taken a couple of pointers from what he saw from TRT Trench a couple of laps ago. And surely discretion would be the better part of valour, because he knows he has fresher tyres. He knows that if he's just patient, he'll have the pace to get past Evan. Just needs to wait for that opportunity. There's Carwin Robb just in front of them. There's Evan and there's Tom going through turn 4. Tom opting to take the tighter line through turn 5 and has to just control the throttle a little bit more on the exit as he rides the curve and almost unsettles the car. Trench has just reeled Tom in a little bit more now that Tom's stuck in the dirty air of Evan. Still 2.5 between Carwin Robb and Evan, so that gap is remaining very consistent indeed. Down towards 12 they go. Tom locking up, but able to take so much more speed into the corner than Evan. Loses the rear slightly on the exit though, as through 13 they go. He's able to get the power down so much quicker, gains 0.3 just through that one corner. And as they round the final turn, Tom is in the slipstream. He's got DRS, he's getting closer to the McLaren. Is he going to be close enough for the overtake in towards turn 1? He looks as though he is, and he's down the inside of Evan, and he's into second place in the Hungarian Grand Prix, although Evan cuts back underneath him, and he's not quite done with the Mercedes yet as they go side by side into turn 2, but Tom covers that off, and he has the position through the second corner. And just under 3 seconds now between himself and Carwin Robb, which will be enough at this stage for Tom to win the Grand Prix. So he's waltzed in to the FPSL, and it looks as though he's going to be a Grand Prix winner straight away. Carwin Robb's penalties will put him behind Tom. They'll also put him behind Evan. Well, actually, no, he won't. That looks of it. Looks as though Evan will not quite at this rate be able to get himself in front. He will also be in front of Trench as well, so keep an eye on that. as this race goes on in terms of penalties and who's going to be where come the end of the Grand Prix. Tom now looks to apply the blowtorch to the back of Carwyn Robb's car. Already has 0.8 of a second back to Evan. Now 0.6 as they round the final corner. Evan will get a little bit closer with the help of DRS in towards turn 1. Excuse me, but he won't get close enough to go for the overtake just yet. Trench now 3.8 behind the McLaren. He does have more pace than Evan, having, of course, put on much fresher tyres in his pit stop. He will be closing that gap quite considerably now as we head on to lap number 28. And of course, as the time progresses, it just begins to look ever more likely that those now 18 lap old hard tyres that Carwyn Robb and Evan find themselves on will make it to the end of the Grand Prix. Carwyn Robb has the lead on track, but he does not lead this Grand Prix on the timing screens. His penalty means that Tom at the moment will be taking victory. So in the 80s then, just continuing the story of Budapest in racing, because it is actually a very interesting one. Neplage circuit was considered as a permanent option in the 1980s. So the authorities wanted to use it as almost like a Monaco-style street track. But the authorities rejected that, and they thought, you know what, we would like a purpose-built Formula 1 circuit. And so there was a site 11 miles away from Budapest, near the town of Mogorod, and that was identified as having a huge amount of velocities. Really, it was very close to the capital city, and I also noticed that it was set in a natural bowl, so it was very conducive to get spectators in the grandstands and get people through the gates, and of course build a racetrack, an undulating racetrack, which still has, I guess, a couple of sort of street race features in the sense that there are a lot of twisty corners, a lot of high-speed stuff going on, and lots of opportunities to get it wrong through here. The main advantage of the bowl was just the spectators really having a good vantage point over the circuit. So this circuit was introduced instead of Neplage, but Neplage did a great job of hoisting the flag for Hungarian motorsport before the Hungaroring was introduced to Formula 1. Trench now are just over 2 seconds away from Evan in the battle for the podium. Tom is closing the gap back to up to Carwyn Robb, I should say. 1.7 now between those two. Tom knows he doesn't actually have to get the move done on track, but he would like to, just for pride and maybe bragging rights. Oh, as he catches the curb on the inside, and that costs him a good half a second. And that now invites a bit of pressure from Evan. So we've seen a few drivers already get it a little bit wrong through turn number 5, and Tom is actually one of those on 2 occasions, as Evan now fights the back end, and he now drops to outside of a second of Tom. That now allows Trench to get to within 2 seconds of Evan as well. So a couple of little errors coming in here and there. Tom will now have to remake that ground back up as he loses the back end now out of the penultimate corner. So everybody here seems to be struggling with rear grip at the moment. Tom, though, doesn't lose quite so much time this time around, and he remains 2 seconds away from Carwyn Robb. Evan 1.4 back from him, and Trent's continuing to close the gap back to the McLaren. Instead, a pretty sizable gap to Button's back on 8 lap old medium, 19.5 seconds back to him. He finds himself 16 seconds in front of Crunchy Trees. So yeah, after 4th place, basically, it's extremely spaced out. It's become a bit of a test session, really, for P5 down to P9. So, real action happening out front here in this Hungarian Grand Prix. the first actual race here was held in 1986. It was actually held in March in the memory of Janos Drapal. He was a four-time motorcycle Grand Prix winner, and he had actually been killed in a race the year before in Czechoslovakia. It wasn't a Formula 1 race, but it was a motor race. And later that year, the first Formula 1 race was held. Nelson Piquet won it in front of about 200,000 fans. The Eastern Bloc countries, of course, a lot of spectators came from there. Germany as well. Quite a few fans coming across from Germany to have a look at that Grand Prix. And Nelson Piquet wrote his name into the history books as the first Formula 1 winner at this circuit in '86. And then once again, the rest, as they say, is history. 35 Championship Grand Prix since then. Lots of different winners in that time. Names like Michael Schumacher, Sebastian Vettel, Lewis Hamilton, Jenson Button. Many races in that time. Fernando Alonso as well for Renault. Lots of big names winning in Hungary over the last few years. Alonso would have also won in 2009 for Renault if it wasn't for his team failing to correctly fit his wheel nut in the pit stop, so his wheel was sent flying across the circuit. Renault were then fined for that incident because it happens to be quite dangerous, unfortunately. Wheels flying across the track. And, in the worst case scenario, of course, it can cause fatal accidents. Sadly, as we saw with Henry Surtees in F2 in 2009. Right. 1.2 now the gap between Carwin, Rob and Tom, so it's starting to look a little bit unlikely that Tom will get this done on track, but he will, you would imagine, get to within a second, and he will of course take the Grand Prix victory by virtue of Carwin Rob's penalties. Trench is 4 seconds away from Carwin Rob, so doesn't look at the moment as though Carwin Rob is going to have much of a chance. He's got 3 seconds of penalties, so 4 seconds back from Carwin Rob is not going to do the business for him. So Carwin Rob, it looks as though he will finish this Grand Prix in probably actually, so yeah, he will finish the race in second place because he's 3.8 ahead of Evan. So not bad going in this middle stint for him. As going into the final couple of laps then, Tom is now within a second. Collins into the pits, so he's back out in P8. Trench is now right behind Evan as they head towards turn number 1, and he slides down the inside and this time gets the move done. Evan, though, again cuts back underneath, but isn't able to execute the cutback on Trench. And he has a little look down the inside into turn 2. There was very nearly contact between them once again, but Trench into third place then in this Hungarian Grand Prix. So that's some more valuable points for him. It's going to mean that the championship gap is extended to 5 points going into Austria, so he's ensured that he's lost a lot less ground than he ordinarily would have done after that mistake several laps ago now, where he ended up spinning the car around, going for an ambitious move on Evans. Sankey Adet is about to be lapped by Carwin Rob. I mean, Warwick Cloud is about to be lapped by Carwin Rob and Tom as they head in towards turn number 13, up the hill towards 14 to begin the final lap of the Grand Prix. So can Tom take the victory on track, or will he be forced to, well, not forced, but, you know, will he be taking the victory via Carwin Rob's penalty? In towards turn 1 they go. He isn't close enough to go for the overtake at the moment. And that will probably be that in terms of who wins the Grand Prix on track. So Tom now just has to keep himself behind Carwin Rob and locks up going into turn 2. He's really eager, isn't he, to get this done, but he knows that all he has to do is just stay behind him and not pick up any penalties on this final lap, and he will be okay. Through turn 4 they go. Nearly loses it. Final lap, Tom. Don't need to be pushing this hard, as in towards 6 and 7 they go. And the Mercedes driver now looks set to take victory in his first FPSL appearance. Trench is still too far back to take advantage of Carwin Robb's penalties. He's 4.2 seconds behind the Alfa Romeo, as Tom once again has to wrestle the back end through turn 11. But Carwin Robb here, well, he's had a decent race so far. Took advantage of the VSC earlier on to make a pit stop. But since then, though, he's picked up just too many penalties in this Grand Prix. He will round the final corner and he'll cross the line to take the Hungarian Grand Prix victory on track. But Tom, with the penalties, wins the Hungarian Grand Prix. Trench finishes in P3, Evan behind him in 4th. And then Buttons back, just coming through turn 12 now, will round the final couple of corners to go ahead and take himself P5 in this race, which will mean we're just waiting for Crunchy Trees in the Alpha Tauri to come through with half a front wing on his car. So he will get P6. Worry Cloud, Colin and Sankey Aded have all finished the Grand Prix because they were a lap down. Crunchy Trees now then. There we go. So he's just making his way in towards the penultimate corner. But TRT Tom, what a great performance from him. He kept his nose out of trouble. He was unbelievably quick throughout this Grand Prix. And he closed the gap to Carwin Robb. He had no penalties compared to Carwin Robb, 6 seconds of them. So after a wonderful performance here today from Tom, it was clean. And he takes victory in Hungary. No extra points then for either pole or fastest lap for either Carwin Robb or Trench, so the gap between those two, 3 points this evening, which means the championship gap will be 5 points going into Austria as Tom wins the Hungarian Grand Prix. There's a double podium for Alfa Romeo with Carwin Robb leading Trench home, Evan in P4, Buttons back in P5, Crunchy Trees in 6th place, Worry Cloud in 7th, Colin and Sankey Aded 8th and 9th respectively. Jendrik got P10, but he non-finished, so he won't pick up any points for that one. Harrison out of the Grand Prix after a collision with Jendrik, and Connor retiring from the Hungarian Grand Prix in the early stages of the race. So the title took a turn in the United States, but Carwin Robb has struck back in Hungary. He reopens the gap, but it is just the 5 points going into the last round in Austria. What a dramatic finale we could be set for in just a week's time. See you then. Take care. Good night.